Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about software that suddenly stops working. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, why is it that a system that has been working and coded correctly all of a sudden stops working properly even if nothing has changed about it? Well, the key word there is properly, being coded properly, because I don't think there's a single system out there that can claim that. But I understand what you're saying, and I will tell you that there are many factors that determine whether or not a system is going to be working, even when you don't change it. One example would be, let's say for the sake of argument that I have built you a web application, or no, let's even not say that. Let's say that I created you a computer game. Because this actually happened to me not that many years ago, and I created this computer program for you, or this computer game, and I made a set of assumptions about the machine that you're going to run this on. If you've ever thought about you like some of the really old computer games, if you're old enough for that, uh, some of those games you won't actually be able to run on modern hardware because they were designed for a different time. Now, some of them you still can run, but you will find some quirks. One of my favorite ones was when I tried to reboot or rekindle my love for the best game that probably was ever made, which is Deus Ex, a few years back, and I couldn't. I started up the game amazingly enough on my modern computer, and it ran. The one thing that was kind of weird though was that whenever I took a step, the sound for taking a step was radically much faster than I remembered. It sounded like I was sprinting crazily, even if I just moved a little bit. So I went on a thread, and they explained that, well, you have to reduce the core number down to one core because this game was not designed to handle, as far as I know at the very least, that more cores than one or two or something like that. And so I did, and the game actually functioned again. And these sorts of assumptions is something that every developer does. This is why it can be extremely hard for someone like, let's say that you are building embedded systems or things like that. As you can imagine, if you're going to build something for, say, the military, well, then you're going to have like really limited resources, and the actual physical device that you have might be exposed to different elements and things like that, so that the code can actually not run as effectively as you designed it to run in your test environment. And this is a real actual problem. An example of what can happen is, let's say that you're creating a web application and you spin that up in the cloud or something like that. Well, if your application is working fine with, say, 10 or 20 users, that doesn't mean that it's going to work if you have a million users, because the application itself is consuming resources. The more people that are connecting to your system, the harder the computer that is underneath that actually runs everything needs to work. And if you don't have enough, if let's say your code is a little bit heavy, or it's in a box, or like on a virtual machine or a computer that doesn't have the capacity to deal with all the traffic that your application is facing when you have like millions and millions of users, the system will crash because it can simply, or it has to do something. Usually it will crash, or it will just stall. Like you won't be able to use the application, like your website won't load or things like that. And that's the sort of thing that is very common when you don't touch the code. But usually, if you haven't touched the code and it still breaks, there is something wrong with it, because it's practically impossible for you to write any type of system of any type of significant size that doesn't have a bug in it, or there's some oversight somewhere in the system. So when you find a bug or an issue of something within an application that is not related to the thing I was saying about oversights in how much load or performance and things like that, if you still find an issue, it's usually down to one of two things. Either that problem has existed from the very beginning and you just didn't figure it out when you were writing the code, or you changed something about the code itself or the environment or like a database or something. Something has changed, because if you write something perfectly, then the computer will execute those commands every single time the same way, assuming of course it's the same computer and the same code. So code doesn't just magically stop working. There's always a human error in there somewhere, or an oversight in how you designed the system. So what I want you to take away from this is that code can break if even if you don't touch it, if you have had an oversight in the system from the beginning, because it's practically impossible to write perfect code. But it can also break if, let's say, that you made assumptions about the run environment it's going to run in. Say that your computer can't deal with the load of a web application or something like that. I have a friend who asked me to spin up a website for him, and then and I said I will give you the cheapest possible, like T1, T2 micro instance on Amazon, and that's gonna have just to get to the free tier, and hopefully that's gonna be okay with you. And he was super happy because it was like basically free for him for at least for the first year. And then he calls me up and says and complains, oh, but Fredrik, the website is down and it keeps on, like sometimes it goes down for no reason. And I go, yes, because I've only created the one instance for you to keep the cost low if you want to have something that works all the time. Because remember, you're renting this capacity from Amazon, so if their machines are under pressure, your machine is going to be, like, your application is going to be under pressure. And if you want to solve that, we're going to have to upgrade you or do something different. So that's an example of what can happen even if the code is working perfectly, because it's not a matter of code, it's a matter of resources. So it's going to be either that that's an issue, or something changed in the environment, or possibly you actually made a mistake, you just didn't realize it until much later when the application was being used. Have a great day.